Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is What If Naruto Gets Turned Into a Girl by Kurama, Part 3. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Knowledge of Naruto's change is told to many of the ninjas of Konoha. Tsunade and many others fear what will happen during the meeting with the clan heads and counselors. It is something Tsunade does not want to do, but is a wise decision to tell now, then finding out from others. It was early in the morning. Tsunade was feeling better than what she had been in the past few weeks. She went over ideals in her head about Naruto, from how to deal with the meeting at noon to his training. She let out a yawn, guessing she should have stayed in bed. She opened the door to Naruto's room and a smile crossed her lips. She kept back her laughter, seeing the fox boy sleeping on his back. She looked around the room and back to the boy. Her smile fell slightly, hoping all would go well. She walked into the room. She grabbed a small bag and put a shirt, boxers and a pair of shorts in it. She did not know if he might change back, but it was best they were prepared. She left the bag hanging on a chair and walked up to Naruto. She chuckled to herself, watching his left front leg twitch. A mischievous grin crossed his lips as she stood next to the boy. She reached down and scratched his belly, watching one of his hind legs jerk. Naruto was having a good dream that was filled with ramen and he was the king. Servants brought him bowl after bowl of his favorite food, including the instant kind. The dream started to fade as his servants brought him the largest bowl of ramen he ever seen. He woke up to his leg kicking, enjoying being scratched on his stomach. His eyes widened and he jumped to stand, only managing to fall off the bed. He heard chuckling and looked to find Tsunade grinning. He rolled over and stood up, grumbling, but it sounded like growling to her. "Good morning, brat." He nodded and started to stretch like a dog, letting out a yawn. He heard her laughing at him and he snorted at her. He rather went back to bed. He looked to her, wishing he could talk, but really be back in his human shape. "We are going to my office. Shizune will be bringing you some ramen to eat." He fox grinned at her and found he was wagging his tail. He looked at his tail, his eyebrows furling. He looked back at Tsunade as she laughed at him again. "Let's say it is attached to your emotions." He tilted his head to the side slightly, she seeing it as a shrug. "Come on." He followed her out. She grabbed the bag and they traveled down the stairs to the bottom floor of the Hokage home. He saw that Kakashi was there, reading his book. He huffed in laughter when the man quickly put the book away when Tsunade shot a glare at him. "I will bring him to your office, after he does his morning business," Kakashi said. Naruto let out a growl at the man. Kakashi ignored him. "Make it quick, the meeting with the ninjas will start in an hour." He nodded and walked to Naruto. He placed a hand on his head and both disappeared. Tsunade shook her head and did the same, arriving in her office. Foxed. Naruto found he was in his team training area. He looked to Kakashi, finding the man reading his book. He snorted and disappeared into the forest. He would come up with a way to get back at anyone that made fun of him in this shape. He wonders what abilities he received from the fox and if he would learn his father's namesake. He let out a sigh, knowing it will be a tough time for him. He came back to Kakashi, finding the rest of the Rookie 9 and Guy's team in the clearing. He stayed back, wondering if they would truly be his friends. He was glad Sasuke was okay and he did not know what to do about him being different. He looked to Ino and Sakura as they talked to themselves. He sneezed, not liking the looks on their faces. He came into the clearing, not liking when everyone became quiet. He saw that some tried to keep a smile from forming. "Naruto, come here," Sakura said. He looked to his female teammate. He saw that her hands were hidden behind her back. He glanced to Ino, seeing that her hands were hidden as well. He did not like their smiles as he moved to Kakashi instead. He sat down next to the man and looked up. "I am ready to go to Oba-chan." Kiba translated and had a smirk on his face when he finished. "It will be in a few minutes, Naruto," Kakashi said. He glanced to Sakura and Ino as they descended on him. He did not know what they had in store as they knelt next to him. I think we can make you into our mascot Naruto. Each of us will have to take care of you and you make a cute pet. Sakura said. He definitely did not like where this was going. He watched as both Sakura and Ino reach up and quickly scratched behind his ears. He tried not to look pleased from the starching, but his tail gave him away with it thumping the ground. He gave a whine when they stopped. He ignored the laughter as he watched as Sakura pull out a brush from behind her back. He glanced at Ino and saw she had a brush as well. What have I gotten myself into? He had no time to move as both girls started to brush him. Maybe I could get used to this, but I want to change back. He was kind of glad the two stopped and moved from him. Well, let's see, a pet will need to be walked, feed, groomed, cleaned up after, kept an eye on, so I guess we will have to make a schedule who has him, maybe a week. Also he will need to be house trained so he won't chew on stuff like shoes or get on the couches. Kakashi said as he read his book. Naruto looked to Kakashi and an ear twitched. He glanced at his friends, thinking revenge was duly in order. Kakashi walked up to him and patted his head. Naruto, come. That was the last straw and Naruto grabbed hold on the copy ninja's pants and ripped down. He spat out the cloth and snorted at the group. He glanced at Kakashi, growling when he found the man wore another pair of pants under the other. Kakashi scratched his chin. A ninja is always adaptation to situations learned. The group laughed and Naruto let out a huff. He glanced at the man. Okay everyone, you need to come to the Hokage office at 11:30, see you then. Kakashi placed a hand on Naruto and both disappeared. The group left with Sakura and Ino coming up with ideals to torture Naruto. Foxed. Naruto walked from the Junin, towards Tsunade. He noticed they were in a larger room than her office. She noticed the ripped pants of Kakashi and sent a glare at the man. You better be here on time, she said. He nodded and left the room, after he pulled his book out. Naruto looked up at Tsunade and she smirked at him. Your breakfast is in that small room. You stay put till I call for you. She pointed to a door along the wall and he nodded. He quickly walked in, finding 6 bowls of ramen. Foxed. The hunters moved on a trail they would mistake as a game trail. No major roads lead to the ninja's hidden village. The group was a mix of emotions as they traveled. Ron was in the front, trying to come up with a way to be led in the village and how to see the leader. He never has been to a ninja village, but had dealt with ninjas before and found them very rude. He glanced back at his men and knew they felt the same way as him. He was afraid he was lost, not knowing if he was going the right way or was given to right directions. A scowl crossed his face as he moved on the trail. Foxed. Tsunade looked at all the Chunin and Junin that could fit in the room. She saw their uneasiness as she looked at them. She would have liked to tap her foot, but a fox head was resting on it and she could hear the soft snores from it. Her headache was coming back as she waited for Kakashi to show up. She steepled her fingers when one of the doors to the room opened up. She heard murmuring from the ninjas and was ready to yell at a tardy Junin. She closed her mouth when she saw it was Jin. The woman nodded her head and moved to an empty seat next to the Hokage. Hokage-sama, I see you are waiting on Kakashi-san, again. Yes, and I can hardly wait till he arrives. Tsunade thought of the torment she would love to give the man. The door opened up again and Kakashi's voice easily traveled over the quiet crowd. Did she start the meeting without me? He asked someone. Hitaki, come here, Tsunade said. The crowd parted enough for the man to walk through. He scratched his chin once he was standing in front of the desk. Sorry I am late. Save your lame excuses for your team, she said, glaring at the man. Sit. Kakashi quickly moved behind her and sat next to Jin. Tsunade looked to the ninjas and cleared her throat. In the past few days, I have come into information of why the Kyuubi attacked our village. She let the group talk to themselves for a moment before she cleared her throat. The room quickly became quiet. Tsunade smirked to herself, finding that Naruto was still asleep. From what I learned, as well as Kakashi, Jin-san, and Jiraiya, the fox did not attack by its free will. It was summoned by unconventional means and was put under a control jutsu. The jutsu broke, once sealed away. She saw many were confused when she said sealed. She knew some of the younger Chunin were still very young when the Kyuubi attacked. Ask your fellow ninjas for the full information about what happened during the battle with the fox, in quiet. The law of the third placed is still in effect. Heads nodded at her words. From what we have learned, the Kyuubi might have been summoned but we do not know by whom. Anger went through the crowd and Tsunade sent a glare at them and they quickly quieted down. I know how you fell, but we cannot just take our revenge and risk the safety of Konoha even if we knew who summoned it. We will plan for now, but we may not make full war. We must outweigh our revenge. Many were not happy about this. Now, from where we received this information, I ask you to stay quiet till I finish. About 2 weeks ago, the Kyuubi started to merge itself with its container, by its own free will. From what it told us, it gave its container abilities I do not know of nor the container. The fox is now dead, but the seal still holds back its power like it did, but a side effect that it did not know that would happen. The container shifted into a fox. Many people stared speaking up, asking questions. Ones who held hate towards Naruto called for him to be killed. Ones, who did not know, were confused and wondered who the container was. She felt Naruto's head move from her foot. She stood up and slammed her hand on the desk. The groan of the wood reminded the ninjas of her godlike strength. He will not be killed and you will be quiet. I am disgusted by many of you who call yourself part of Konoha. The boy was chosen to bear this burden because his father did not want to burden others of his decision, and yes, he does know who his father was. Naruto, come out. Many went wide-eyed. Naruto walked out slowly from under the desk. He poked his head around the desk and gathered the courage to move so everyone could see him. He did not know his tail was tucked between his legs and his ears were folded back. Tsunade sent a glare at the group. She saw many cower down. He is, as you can see, in the shape of a fox. I wanted to get this part of what happened to him over with. I ask you to keep this to yourselves and I will have the others know of this. Now you are free to return to your duties. The ninjas left the room in quiet. Tsunade looked to Naruto as he laid down, knowing he was glad they were gone. She looked to Jin. That went better than I thought. I will see you at the noon meeting. Jin said. The women stood up and walked out of the room. Tsunade rubbed her temples, knowing the meeting with the clan heads and village elders would be much worse. She found that Kakashi sneaked out with the ninjas. She looked to Naruto. Naruto. He looked back at her. Let's go to my office, I need a drink and a nap. He followed her out of the room and kept close to her. Everyone that looked at him knew who he was. He did not know what to make of the looks he received. Many were regret. He quickly entered her office and she slammed the doors shut, a clear signal not to bother her. She smiled to herself, at keeping up with the workload as Hokage. She walked to her desk and sat down. She watched Naruto as he moved to the window and looked out. She smiled to herself as she pulled a drawer open and pulled out a bottle of sake and a cup. She poured her some and put the bottle back. She drank the sake in one gulp and dropped the cup in the drawer, shutting it. She let out a sigh. She glanced at the couch, her smile deepening. She looked to Naruto as he watched the going on outside. You better be quiet, brat. If someone comes in, hide under my desk. He nodded and watched her move to the couch and laid down on it. He shook his head and lay down under the window. He let out a sigh and let himself fall asleep. Foxed. Shizune walked into the Hokage office, knowing she would find Tsunade asleep. She was a bit surprised to find the women asleep on the floor, but guessed she fell off the couch. She walked to her teacher and knelt down. Tsunade-sama, you need to wake up. Tsunade stirred and blinked, finding herself on the floor. She pushed off the floor, sitting on her knees. She let out a yawn, feeling refreshed from her nap. What time is it? She asked. 11. I came to get you ready. Many of the elders are not happy with this sudden meeting. Who cares about them? Tsunade said with anger. She stood up and looked to the window, not finding Naruto. She walked to her desk, looking under it. She smiled, seeing Naruto curled in a ball, asleep. She let out a sigh and sat down. Did you get it? She asked. Shizune nodded and pulled a box from her pouch. Tsunade opened it up, smiling at what was inside. A knock from the doors and Kakashi poked his head inside. Sorry if we are late. You are actually early, Hataki-kun. Bring them in, Tsunade said. Kakashi nodded his head and the 4 Junin leaders of Team 7, 8, 10 and Guy's team walked in, followed by their teams. Sasuke flexed his arm, glad to get the cast off. Shizune left the room. I will ask you to come to this meeting, to show support for Naruto. You will be hidden behind a partition. It will be a bit uneasy since some of your family will be there. Now, Naruto will show you where the meeting will be taking place. I need to talk to your senseis. The group nodded and Tsunade looked under her desk. She shook her head slightly, finding Naruto still asleep. Brat, wake up and take your friends to the meeting room we were in this morning. Naruto picked up his head and looked up at the women. He got up and moved out, yawning. He stopped when the tip of his tail was grabbed. He looked back at Tsunade. She pulled the item from the box and Naruto saw it was an orange collar with a smaller metal plate with the symbol of Konoha. Tsunade slipped it on, smiling at him. Naruto pulled his tail free and looked at the women. What about my forehead proctor and necklace? He asked. Kiba translated and Tsunade smiled at him. I put them up for now. Once this mess is over with, I will give them back to you. He nodded and took off past the group. They followed him out. Sakura quickly made her way next to Naruto. Naruto, when do you think you will summon a kitsune? Kakashi told us. Naruto glacé to her and looked ahead of him. The group traveled down a long flight of stairs. Naruto paused at 2 large double doors. He looked at the group. I don't know when. The group nodded after Kiba explained. Naruto knows the door opened and the group walked in. Shizune looked up from the desk as she straightens out papers. Good. Now you will sit behind the partition. There is food and drink for you to snack on. Tsunade has set up the meeting to discuss some topics of the village, before talking about Naruto. I did put up a vision, sound and scent barrier around the partition. You will still be able to hear what is going on. Wear them out and then hit them with something they were not expecting. Neji said. Shizune nodded. Now why don't you go sit down? I know many will arrive early, she said. The group walked towards the wall. They passed the partition that was pure white. Choji made his way to the table with food. Shikamaru found a window and moved chairs together and lay down on. The rest found seats. Naruto moved to a window that had a large spot of sunlight on the ground. He did not know why, but he enjoyed sunbathing. He curled in a ball and fell asleep. The group looked at him for a minute and many had smiles on their faces. They sat down. The 4 girls got together and Sakura and Ino pulled out many items from their pouches. Hinata was shy, and did not know what to make of the smiles from the other 3. Ino and Sakura laughed as they pulled out ribbons and Tenten had a grin on her face. The boys looked at them, knowing it was not going to end well. Naruto does not know what caused the ideal he would look cute with pink ribbons placed on him. He just knows revenge will be a dish served best cold, when his tormentors become the victims of his revenge. He looked to Kiba as the boy was doing his best to hold back his laughter. Naruto wished he had the ability to transform his friends into animals. He would change the dog boy into a cat for revenge. He looked to Shikamaru and knew he would do a chibi deer. Sasuke would be a pink raven. He was laughing in his mind at the image of the group. He let out a deep breath, wishing his torture was over with. He let out a whine and lay down, crossing his paws. He set his head on his legs and looked to Kiba. He spoke as the boy fell back, letting out his laughter. Kiba, I am wondering if I have the ability to change your from. I would like to see what you would look like as a cat. Kiba sat up with a shot, his eyes wide. You wouldn't, would you? Kiba asked, afraid. Naruto swished his tail and what looked like a grin crossed his face, baring his teeth. Yes. Kiba paled and everyone was looking at him, wanting to know what he said. Kiba stood up and made his way to the table. He looked back, shaking slightly. Do you want something, Naruto? Naruto gave him a grin. Some of those grapes will be nice in a bowl of water. Kiba nodded and busied himself making Naruto and him a plate. Sakura and Ino looked at each other and down to Naruto. They glanced to Kiba as he set a plate and a bowl down. Naruto stood up and lapped up the water. He looked back at his tail, wishing for a way to burn off the ribbons the girls put on him. He flicked his tail, but the bow tied there would not come off. He ate some of the grapes, wondering how he was going to persuade the girls to get the ribbons off. He looked up as Shizune walked in. She quickly placed a hand over her mouth, preventing herself from laughing. She walked up to Naruto and knelt down. She looked to the girls. Sorry, but he is needed. The four frowned and quickly took off the bows. Naruto was glad to be free of them. He looked to the women. Come on, Naruto. Come out when you are called. He nodded his head and followed her to the end of the partition. He glanced back and shot a fox grin at Kiba. He looked up and followed the women out, to face one of his biggest obstacles yet. Foxed. Tsunade placed her folder down. She gave the group a small smile and spoke up. We are done with the pressing matters of Konoha. I am glad you took the time to come. Now, for the last business of this meeting and the true reason I called you all together today. The matter has to do with Uzumaki Naruto. She saw anger flash through many that were there. She wanted to send glares to the Hyuga elders, knowing their bias against the boy. She spoke up, easy silencing the room. She stood up, easy placing some fear in the group. First I need to tell you of what I and 4 others of the information we have received about 2 weeks ago. It is of the Kyuubi. I believe it, since it came from the fox itself. She rolled her eyes at the uproar occurred in the room. She slammed her hand on the desk, which caused a loud groan and a crack. The room became quiet. Tsunade looked at the now broken desk, a crack running across the center of the desk. A frown crossed his lips as it caved in slightly. She shrugged and walked forward. During its talk with I and the other 4, we found it was summoned by unknown means and placed under control by the person. It tired to fight the control, but as we know, it lost. It did not know who summoned it. Since the lack of the information, we cannot do anything about that as of now, until we come into information that we can verify. It will not do good to go at war with someone that was not the one that did this act. She took a breath and held her head up high. She spoke out, making sure everyone heard her. About 2 weeks have passed since the conversation with the fox and its decision it had made. It had willing allowed its power merge with its host or jailer, as some of you will call him. It told us that it would be giving the boy abilities, which it did not tell us. It gave the boy the ability to summon a fox for help to learn his new abilities, yet it did not foresee a side effect. The boy, Uzumaki Naruto, transformed into a fox. Minimal murmuring went around the room. They knew to be quiet until the Hokage finished speaking. Tsunade nodded to Shizune. The women got up and went to retrieve Naruto. I believe myself that he will be able to transform back to his human shape, since he has in the past few days. She glanced to some as they talked among themselves. She decided to cut many of them short from ideals she would never agree to. I will say this now, the boy will not be turned into a tool. Many of you did not agree for the boy to stay alive or were angry with what Sarutobi, my sensei, done for the boy. He is part of this village. It is his home, as was his father's. If he was a type of demon, then why had he not attack our home, revenge from the hatred he received as he grew up, and don't think you will go over my head to do what you plan, the boy is under my guardianship, like it was with the Sandame. Shizune led Naruto out. He walked out with his head held high and tail straight out. It showed he was calm and did not care what they thought of him, but inside his heart was racing. He did not know if he could even sweat in this from, but knew he would have been by the buckets. His eyes were darting around, looking at the group. He saw clan heads and counselors. He saw many were angry, but was glad that the anger was outnumbered by apologetic ones. He stopped next to Tsunade and felt like his stomach was in knots. He closed his eyes and took off, hiding under the ruined desk. He was not happy. Tsunade frowned and walked around the desk. She wondered if the presser might have gotten to him. She looked under the desk and started to laugh. "Shut up, Oba-chan," Naruto said in a growled voice. Naruto sat there holding his legs close to him, hoping to hide his lower half from view. Tsunade stood up and looked at the group. She had a small smile as she motioned for Kakashi. The man walked forward and looked under the desk. His eyes showed amusement as he tossed a pair of shorts to the boy. Tsunade gave a short nod. "Since this has happened, I have come to a decision. I will be sending Naruto out of the village for a few months to train and get acquainted to his new abilities. With the ability to summon a fox, they will be able to help him," as the Kyuubi said. "In addition, I was given an ideal by Jin-san that we send his friends with him to train as well and give them a type of vacation. They will learn outside their set field, to give them better chances. I will not take no as answer or that something different should be done about Naruto. As of now, he is a normal boy, but with abilities akin to a kitsune." Meeting adjourned. If you have anything to say, or questions, please set up a time to meet with me. Tsunade turned around and walked to the other side of the desk, easy ending the meeting and avoiding questions. She looked under and found Naruto fast asleep. She shook her head and looked to Kakashi. "If you will." The man nodded and grabbed hold of the boy. He slung him over his back and Tsunade looked at him. She messed with his hair, finding it much longer and wilder. She ran a thumb over his whisker-like marks and looked to Kakashi. "I hope he will stay like this for a while. Now, you take him to his room." Kakashi nodded and disappeared in a cloud of smoke. Tsunade looked to Shizune as she went behind the partition. A grin crossed the woman's lips as she quickly left the room. Foxed. The group of young ninjas was quiet. They were surprised by the speech by the Hokage and the way she calmed the adults down. They looked up as Shizune appeared. "Give about 10 minutes for the building to clear out, then you are released." "What about Naruto?" Sakura asked. "He is okay. He transformed back in his human shape. Kakashi took him home. I will send for you when he wakes." Many of the young ninjas had similes at this. Kiba stood up and scooped up his partner. "What about us going with him to train?" he asked. "You will be told at a later time," Shizune said. She walked away, leaving the group in quiet. Sasuke looked to Kiba and a smile crossed his lips. "Kiba, what did Naruto tell you that made you pale?" Kiba looked at him and frowned. "He said he was wondering if he had the ability to change me into a cat." Everyone started to laugh. "I don't think it was funny. What if he did have it?" Many shrugged. Shikamaru let out a yawn and decided to fall asleep. Ino and Sakura got up and grabbed the lazy Nara by the arms. They dragged him out of the room, with him frowning. "Oh no, we are all going shopping to pick out some more things for Naruto's party," Ino said. Everyone obliged and followed the two as Shikamaru snorted and said his phrase of troublesome, which he added women in his mind, not wanting to be hit for his remark. Foxed. Naruto gave a whimper as he tossed on his bed. He curled into a ball and started to mumble in his sleep. Inside of his dream, Naruto found himself in a large room that looked like a kitchen. Cabinet doors and chairs towered over him. He looked down at himself, finding he had what looked like pod hands and feet. He was only in a pair of shorts that were orange. His eyes went wide, finding a tail that looked like a fox. He grabbed it and let out a whimper of distress. He looked to his legs and found them covered in fur. He reached up and let out a cry, finding he had fox ears. He wiggled his toes, which were white-tipped and had sharp-clawed toenails. He heard a chiming and felt around his neck. He found a collar was there and a bell was attached to the end. He took off for 2 bowls on the ground. One had his name on it and both were set on an orange mat. He stopped and slid on the slick floor, running into the water bowl and bunching up the mat. He looked down at his reflection in the large water bowl, which he could lay in. He gave a cry and reached up to touch his ears. He gave a tug, finding them real. He gave another whimper, wondering what was going on. He looked to his face and looked at his whisker marks. He reached up and found he had actual whiskers. He pulled them, giving another cry. He opened his mouth, showing off sharp canine teeth. His eyes widened when he found a pink collar around his neck and a golden bell attached to the end. He grabbed what were dog tags and read his name engraved on the metal tag. He looked to his eyes and found them slit like a cat's. He stood up and his ears swiveled, hearing his name being called. He heard his name being called again and he took off running, on all fours. He stopped and looked around a doorframe and his eyes widened. He looked at his friends, or what he believed was his friends. They towered over him, but he could not make out their faces. He looked to who he thought was Sakura as the girl knelt down and beckoned him over. He moved back, afraid for the first time in a long time. He gave a yelp as someone picked him up by the scruff and held him like a baby. He struggled, but lost as someone rubbed his stomach. He did not know it, but he was making a noise that showed he enjoyed the attention. He barely heard what the person said and he recognized it as Tsunade's voice. Don't worry Sakura, he is just shy. Why don't you take him out for a walk? Naruto sat up in bed and gave a cry. He blinked and looked around the room. His hands shot out, felling himself. He tugged at his hair, not finding fox ears. He ran his hands down his head and found his human ears. He tugged them, making sure they were real. He bit down on his tongue and found he did have sharper teeth than he remembered. He reached behind him, finding no tail. He threw back his covers and wiggled his toes, seeing normal toenails. He winced when the lights went on in the room and covered his eyes. He lowered his arms and looked to Tsunade as she walked in the room. She knelt next to him and ran a hand along his back. He flinched at the contact, but relaxed as he felt chakra from the women. He leaned against her and she smiled at this. What happened? He looked at her and down. He moved closer to her and told her of his dream. When he was finished, she was having trouble keeping her laughter. He turned from her and crossed his arms. He pouted. It's not funny. I think it is. Now why don't you go back to sleep? He looked to her, giving her a pout and batting his eyes. I can't. I'm hungry. She snorted and looked to an alarm clock in the room. It read 5:30 in the morning. She let out a sigh. Come on, might as well get up. You get a shower and dressed. You will have something besides ramen. Naruto snorted and dodged a hit to his head. He watched her leave and he moved out of his bed. He entered the bathroom and flipped on the light switch. He turned on the water and looked in the bathroom mirror. His eyes went wide at seeing his eyes were slit. He opened his mouth and looked at his canine teeth. He ran his tongue along his teeth, finding them all sharp. He ran a hand through his hair, finding it wilder and longer. He frowned, looking back at his eyes. He let out a sigh, but it was cut short as a grin formed on his face. He thought of the imitation by just the look of his eyes only. He got out of his shorts and climbed into the shower. He relaxed as he let the warm water run down his body. He glanced to the tattoo on his shoulder and fingered it. He would like to summon the fox now, but knew he would be in trouble. He grabbed some shampoo and washed his hair. He finished in the bathroom and wrapped a towel around his body. He exited the room and looked for clothes. All he could find was underwear, boxers, plain colored shirts and shorts. He let out a sigh as he grabbed something. As he tried to brush out his hair, finding many tingles, he looked to his fingernails. He thought of the times using Kyuubi's chakra and his nails grew as well his teeth. He pictured having the claws and willed it to happen. He smiled as he watched his nails become claw-like. He looked around the room for something to try them out on. He twitched his nose and scratched the end. He snorted, only finding his nails were good for scratching, for now. He willed his nails to be normal and watched as it happened. He titled his head, wondering if this could be true about him shifting into a fox form. He shrugged, deciding he would find out later. He quit on his hair, finding it too much trouble. He got dressed, knowing he was going be talked to, on his choice of clothes. A yellow short-sleeved shirt and a pair of orange shorts. He snorted, finding both were very big on him. The shirt bottom came to his knees and the sleeves past his elbows. The shorts barely hung on his hips, even pulling on the drawstrings. He went in search for clothes that would fit him, but found nothing. He rolled his eyes and they shot to the packages on the table. He quickly walked up to them, but found a note not to open them. He pouted, but took off, running down the stairs to the kitchen, tucking most of his shirt under his shorts. He entered and found Shizune cooking something. His nose twitched and his stomach grumbled. She looked up and shook her head. Go brush your hair, then you will get something to eat. I can't, I have too many tangles. He whined. He jumped slightly as his hair was grabbed. He looked back, seeing it was Tsunade. She looked at him, narrowing her eyes. That man does not know how to shop. We will have to get you different clothes after breakfast. Now, let's see about your hair. She pulled him back upstairs and into her room. She forced him to sit down and picked up a brush. He closed his eyes, waiting for her to begin. He opened an eye and watched as she opened a bottle. She squirted a large amount of the liquid on her hands. He flinched as she rubbed her hands on his head. He started to relax, as she made sure to get the liquid spread throughout in his hair. He looked at her as she picked the brush back up and ran it through his hair. He smiled as she made quick work. Remind me to get you some, she said. He nodded and took a sniff of the air. He could not place the smell. Lavender. He nodded as she set the brush down and looked at him from the mirror. She rolled her eyes as he shook his head, causing his hair to spike back up. Come on, Shizune should be done with breakfast. He nodded and followed her down the stairs. He stopped at the last steep and spoke up. What do I say about my eyes? He asked. She turned to him and let out a sigh. For now, you can say it is an ability that has wakened up. We can see about placing a hinge over your eyes, or you can try to wear sunglasses. He looked at her and nodded. A small smile crossed his lips. He followed her into the dining room. He filled his plate and ate many helpings. Neither Tsunade nor Shizune stopped him, knowing his body used the energy processed from the food to restore his chakra and help his body heal. Naruto looked up when he was finished and tilted his head. He had a grin on his face. Can I get a pair that is orange? Tsunade rolled her eyes, wondering if she would find a way to wean him off the color orange, but that would never happen. It would be like Jiraiya giving up his research, which would mean him quit his perverted ways. She could not imagine it. We will see. Now, I want you to stay out of trouble. If you happen to change, try to hide in the forest. I will send someone to get you if I don't see you tonight. I want you here by 9, you got that? He rolled his eyes at her. Yes, Mom. She snorted at him and stood up. Shizune, could you go with Naruto and pick out some cloths for him and other things? I will have other clothes for him later, so only shorts, shirts and some pants. The women nodded and Naruto pouted. Minimal orange please. He curled his nose at her. He looked at her, deciding to tell her something he found out. Hey Oba-chan, look what I can do. I thought of it earlier and it worked. She refrained herself from hitting him and watched as the nails on his fingers grew into claw-like. She raised an eyebrow as she watched the nails become normal. She thought of him using the same concept of transforming back and forth from his fox form. He looked up at her, giving her a smile. Don't try to change into a fox as of yet. I rather have help from a fox to help you with that. He nodded and stood up. I did not find any shoes. Tsunade muttered some cusses and stood up. She looked to Shizune. Please send a message to Hataki-kun, which I need to talk about the matters of getting clothes that fix and making sure to get everything on a list. Shizune nodded and walked next to Naruto. He stood up and moved next to her. She gave him a smile and led him out of the room. He had to pull up his shorts. He looked back as Tsunade let out a sigh. Naruto, pull the drawstrings. He lifted the overhand of his shirt, showing off a huge bowtie knot, which most of it was tucked away, under the band of his shorts. I did and they are still big on me. He smirked and quickly took off to catch up with Shizune. Tsunade let out a sigh and summoned 4 shadow clones. She had them clean up the mess from breakfast. She went back upstairs, grabbing some last-minute paperwork she finished last night. She let out another sigh and teleported to her office, not wanting to face the day. Foxed. Naruto watched as Shizune picked out clothes that would fit him. She reminded him about masking his eyes. He frowned as she picked up a pair of dark brown pants. He opened his mouth to protest, but she spoke before he could say a word. I know Naruto, but it will not hurt that you wear something besides orange. I know Tsunade-sama will make sure to put some orange in your clothes. Be thankful she got you orange bedding and even allowed orange shorts and shirts to be bought. He gave her a pout as he looked around the store. She ignored it as she grabbed more pairs of the pants. He glanced at his fingers, thinking he found something to try out his claws on. He looked up when Shizune called his name. He followed her to the counter and she paid for the clothes. He caught a pair of pants and shirt. Go change. He nodded and took off for a dressing room. He pulled off the shirt and shorts, not even needing to untie them. He slipped on the pants and pulled on the shirt. He looked at himself in the mirror. He rolled his eyes at the dark green long sleeve shirt and dark brown pants. He had grin at the many pockets. He ran a finger in one, finding the lining was reinforced. He looked at his reflection, guessing the women picked out the clothes to match with his hair and eyes, which he was wondering why she did not pick out a dark blue shirt for him to wear. He shrugged, knowing there were some in the many pairs of red, dark gray, dark yellow and, which he grinned at, dark orange shirts, along with many more colors. He gave a nod, guessing he could get used to something besides orange. He hooked a finger under the item around his neck. It was an inch and a half in width. He smirked at the orange color of the band. He sent it spinning around his neck and stepped out of the dressing room. He quickly returned to grab the shirt and shorts, which he would use for nightclothes. He walked up to Shizune and gave her a smile. All he would need was a pair of shoes and his shinobi items. Let's get you some shoes and head back home. Shizune said. He nodded and followed her to another store, which turned into many. He did not complain, since they stopped at the optometrist and had the man craft a pair of black-rimmed frames and dark orange-tinted lenses, which wrapped around his face. The lenses were oval to egg shape, with more of a sharp point. The points pointed inward, making them look like eyes. He liked them, since they gave him a peripheral view. Naruto was in heaven, feeling happy, even if so much bad happened to him. He frowned, missing Sarutobi slightly, but his smile returned, thinking of all the friends he had now and the others that saw him who he was, Uzumaki Naruto, Konoha's #1, loud, unpredictable ninja. Naruto looked up at the ceiling in his room. He threw up a rubber ball in the air and caught as it came down. The rush of all that happened came to him and he could not fall asleep. He looked to the alarm clock and found it was 4:30 in the morning. He closed his eyes, trying to get the memories of his fight with Sasuke out of his mind. The last image of his friend stuck in his mind. He sat up and shook his body, trying to rid of the horrified face of the Uchiha. He got out of bed and walked to his door. He pulled his shorts up, fearing they would fall off him, and pulled on his shirt to have it rest better on his shoulders. He was wearing pure orange. He pulled off his nightcap and tossed it back to his bed. He opened the door quietly and listened to the sounds around him. It was not much, but sounds were somewhat louder. He also picked up sounds he never heard of before. He did enjoy his changed vision. He let out a sigh and focused on a sound, closing his eyes. His eyebrow twitched, hearing the loud snoring of Jiraiya, who was in the room from across his. He was glad the man was not in the same room as his. He turned his head and brought his attention to Shizune's room. He walked up to her door and pressed his ear against the door. He heard her soft snoring. He moved to the room at the end of the hall and did the same at Tsunade's door. He heard no noise from the room and guessed she was somewhere else. He took a sniff, furling his eyebrows. He could not place the scent, but it smelled like slugs and it was disappearing. He titled his head, wondering if he could smell the creature the person summons, or she summoned a slug earlier. He believed it was the latter. He pouted as he placed a hand over his stomach and listened as it roared away. He scratched the back of his head, thinking of what he could eat. He could not go out to eat ramen, since it was about 5 in the morning. Another reason was Tsunade was holding his frog wallet hostage, making sure he did not try to transform or find any of his abilities out, and 3. He was threatened with the chance of server punishment if only ate purely ramen. He was only allowed 4 bowls of the stuff and only at lunch, unless something came up. He pouted again as he made his way downstairs. He stopped on the last steep and sniffed the air. He smelt dogs, but not as strong as Kiba's scent. He also smelt dango, red bean soup, and sulfur. He turned to his right, smelling the dog's scent closer to him. He walked a few paces and passed a blank wall on his right, then came to a table with a lamp. He walked backwards when the scent faded. He stopped and looked at the wall and tilted his head. A grin crossed his lips as he reached out and poked the wall. It felt soft. He did it again, his grin deepening. Poke. He said. The wall folded down, showing a ninja in a dog mask. Naruto looked at it and tilted his head the other way. He blinked, seeing the silver hair that stood on end. He glanced to the bone-white armor, guards on the lower arm, black ninja gloves with metal plates, which were dull, and the utility pouch at the back and a weapon oscillator at the leg. There were also shin guards on the lower legs. He looked to the mask, only seeing one eye open, and it looked amused. Kakashi-sensei, I think you need to lose some weight, it looks like need to add another notch in your armor. Kakashi looked at him shocked. He looked down to the straps that held his chest armor on. Yeah, he was on the last notch, and he has not worn his armor for about half a year, or so. He had to take them in to get the leather straps replaced, and he had asked the leather worker to cut off the excess. He looked to Naruto as he moved around the room, seeing if he could not find the others. Kakashi chuckled to himself, knowing this was not going to be good when he finds one of them. He watched Naruto walk to the front door, disappearing from the room. He looked to his left as Tsunade walked out of the dining room. Is Naruto up? She asked. Yes, and he found me when he came down. He went off to see if he could not find the other 2. He is on the trial of Ebisu. Tsunade nodded and turned around. She spoke up as she walked back into the dining room. Tell the brat if he wants something to eat, hurry up with his search. Kakashi nodded and watched a smiling Naruto walk in the room. Who did you find? He asked. Naruto looked at him for a moment, then started to look around the room. The close closet pervert. Kakashi raised an eyebrow as he watched the boy walk to the entrance of the dining room. He stopped, right where the open space of the wall was. There. He said, pointing at the space that smelled like dango and red bean soup. Both watched the wall seem to come to life, and a hidden ninja was found, wearing a raven-type mask. Naruto titled his head, trying to place the ninja's hairstyle and color. He looked to the almond-colored eyes, behind the slits. He looked to the tan-colored jacket and fishnet shirt. He reached up, not knowing he was doing it, and rubbed at a spot on his cheek. His eyes widened, placing the person. The sadistic women from the second part of the Chunin exam, he said quietly. Kakashi heard Anko chuckling. It was either good or bad. He estimated all the bad and good things that happen, and found the bad outnumbered the good. He watched the women reached out and tapped Naruto on the nose. He thought this was good, he hoped. Naruto did not like the laughter from the women. He did nothing to hide his shudder after the women touched him. He did not know why the urge to run away and hide somewhere was filling his senses. He jumped as the women wrapped an arm around his shoulders and brought him closer to her. Both Kakashi and Anko were surprised and shocked that Naruto shifted into a fox right before them. It happened so fast. First was the appearance of blonde fur. Then it was his ears, which curved slightly before they started to from his fox ears and move up along his head. Nails became longer and sharper. His face started to stretch. Parts of his body lengthened or shortened. Naruto shifted right back into his fox form, yet it was different, which was the reason that the two were shocked. As Naruto's body shifted, he was in the air, which to the two Junin felt like a long time. When his body was finished transforming, he dropped to the ground and took off, slipping out of his clothes. Kakashi took a step to the dining room, about to go after Naruto. He stooped and flinched from the yell by Tsunade. He watched Anko run towards the yell. He followed, swallowing his fear of the Godime Hokage. He stopped behind Anko, which she was standing by the doorframe to the kitchen. He peered in, looking at Tsunade. He followed her gaze and his ears to the floor. He heard a mix of warning growls and a hissing noise. He was only able to see part of a blonde muzzle and part of a leg. The rest of the fox was hiding behind Tsunade's nightgown. Kakashi looked up and Tsunade narrowed her eyes at the two. The two raised their masks. Kakashi's eyes showed a mix between fear and shock. Anko was trying her best to suppress her smile. Tell me what happened, Tsunade asked, venom in her voice. Kakashi walked forward and stopped as the growling increased and the fox completely disappeared under her gown. He let out a sigh and told what happened. He flinched as Tsunade's glare fixed on Anko as the women snickered behind the copy nin. Anko, please try and not torment Naruto in the future, unless I tell you to. I think his fear of you caused the change. Now please report to your post. Anko was still laughing as she walked away. Kakashi looked to the women and gave her a shrug. Get him. I don't want to step on him. Tsunade said. Kakashi raised an eyebrow, just knowing this was going to be bad. He moved his mask to rest backwards on his head. He walked forward and knelt down. He placed a hand on the tabletop for support and reached under her chair. The growling came back, which Kakashi quickly brought his hand back. Both heard a snap as the mouth of a fox closed. He stood up and moved around the women. He got a good look at the small fox, which he thought Fox Kit. He watched it as it watched him. He knelt down, looking at it. It bared its teeth at him and crouched down, its hair bristling and hackles raised. He smirked under his mask, thinking this was cute, no, funny. He blinked, sobering up. He pictured the size of Naruto when he first transformed and thinking he would be in more pain, then a bit finger. He looked to the kid as it backed away from him. With lightning reflexes, his hand shot out and grabbed the scruff. He stood up and watched as it jerked its body to get free from him. Tsunade stood up as it still and started to whimper. She was confused, looking at the kit. Naruto, calm down, Anko's gone, she said. She reached out and cupped a hand under his belly, finding he fit in her hand, with his legs hinging over. She brought his closer to her and started to pet his back. Defense mechanism, Kakashi said. She looked to him, wanting to know what he meant by that. He ran a hand through his hair, thinking out his reply. Foxes and snakes don't like each other. Since Naruto is little and Anko is bigger, I think his instincts told him to run. At his first meeting with Anko, he was not afraid of her till she, well, you know what she did. Tsunade nodded and looked down, seeing the kid relaxing in her hold. Naruto, I want you try the same concept you used to make your nails to grow into claw-like to change back to your human shape. She set him down and watched as he started to sniff the ground. He moved to Kakashi, sniffed his foot, and let out a growl, before attacking his pants. Both looked at each other and down as the kit tugged on the man's pants and lost its hold. He rolled backwards into Tsunade's feet. They watch it got back up and give a snort, before looking up at Tsunade. It yapped at her and started to try to catch its tail. Tsunade clenched her jaw, before talking in a voice that sent chills down Kakashi's back. Naruto, you better not be playing around, it is not funny. She blinked as it turned to her and flattened its body on the ground, ears laying flat on its head and tail tucking between its legs, before it started to back away. She glanced to Kakashi, seeing his visible eye wide. She nodded as Kakashi spoke. I think he is in a trance. The flight or fight instinct happened with him. It could be he will be like this for a while, waiting for a period to pass before he comes to his senses. I hope I am right, he said. I believe you. If he does not change back to himself, one of us can summon the fox for help. Kakashi looked at her. She gave a sharp nod. Someone can assist a person who has a summon contract. Kabuto did it for Orochimaru when he came looking for me to fix his arms. 1. They have to have knowledge in the creature they are summoned and know where the tattoo is, if it is not visible. Tsunade looked down as Naruto back up into a corner. She walked forward and watched him hunch down in fear. She scooped it up and held it in her arms. She rubbed its back and turned to Kakashi, with a large grin on his face. Dreams are windows to our fears, desires, truth, justice and so forth. We don't know why, but many of people's dreams gave the person a look in their future. The event may happen tomorrow or in the far future of the person's life. We just do not know what our dreams hold for us, till we grasp that dream we want to fulfill us, finding ourselves in the masses. Kakashi raised an eyebrow at this speech. What do you mean? He asked. She chuckled to herself. He woke up the other night from a nightmare. He dreamt of himself being a mix between fox and human. Let's just say, he was not too happy with me laughing at him for it. Kakashi snorted in laughter. He looked to Naruto and shook his head. Then why did he not change into size he was? He asked. Tsunade nodded at this and both were quiet for a few minutes. Naruto might have wanted a place to hide under, which he would fit under a lot of stuff in the living room now. Might as well get a small collar with a bell. I think I have a box to put him in for now. Kakashi scratched the back of his head, coming up with an ideal. I think I can help you there. She shot him a glare and he held up his hands in defense. No, not that. I have something different. The collar will be able to break if he changes back to either his larger fox self or human self. When the collar breaks, the one you gave him will be free from a seal. I will have clothes sealed in both. She nodded and looked down, seeing Naruto was asleep. She hoped they were right. She looked back at Kakashi. Have it done. Get your team to meet in the morning, they will need to babysit him. Kakashi nodded, chuckling. He walked off, placing his mask back over his face. Tsunade spoke up. No pink collar or you will be wearing the color for a month. Kakashi missed a step and nearly fell over at the vision he conjured. Tsunade moved to the refrigerator. She opened it and watched Naruto's head pick up, seeing all the food. She watched him sniff the air. He turned to her and back to the food. He glanced down and his eyes went wide. 1. He was far off the ground. 2. He was being held, as it was in his dream. He looked back at her as she closed the door to the refrigerator. He started to wiggle in her hold. She quickly put him down and watched as he closed his eyes and changed back to his human shape. She chuckled as he quickly covered his lower half up with his hands. He opened his mouth about to yell out, but she quickly covered it, muffling his cry of what happened. Naruto, you be quiet, she said in a whisper. He looked to her, stilling under her gaze. He almost wanted to transform back into a fox. Naruto, just be quiet and don't yell out or even talk. I will explain what happened to you after we get to my bedroom. Now, see about changing back to a fox, the size you just was. She pulled back her hand and watched confusion wash over his face. He opened his mouth to say something, but closed it. Just do it, she said. He nodded slowly and closed his eyes and willed himself to a fox, but smaller. She watched the transformation happen, nodding once he was back to chibi size, she dubbed. She picked him back up and went back to the refrigerator. She grabbed both something to eat. She turned around and walked back towards the living room. She cussed in her mind, not coming up with an ideal to snap him out of his fox trance. She filed the information away and stopped. She spoke in his ear, loud enough for only him to hear. Act like a fox. Growl when you smell Anko's scent. She took off and stepped out into the living room of the Hokage home. She stopped and picked up Naruto's nightclothes. She felt Naruto rumble as he growled as she asked him. She quickly went to her room and stopped as Jiraiya exited out of his room. He looked at her, his face showing confusion. What in the hell happened? He asked. He walked forward and stopped as the kid started to growl at him. He grew angry, walked forward, and snatched the kid by the scruff. Tsunade shot a glare at him as he shook Naruto. Damn disrespectable brat. He mumbled. He stopped as it cried out in pain. Tsunade took him and snarled at the man as she spoke. He transformed into a fox after he confronted Anko. He has been acting like a fox for the past half hour. Jiraiya went wide-eyed. He opened his mouth to say something, but Tsunade cut him off. I don't want to explain it right now. I want to get some more sleep. She walked to her room and slammed the door shut. She walked to her bed and set Naruto down, with his clothes. She turned around, walked to door, and locked it. She turned around when she heard a yelp. She turned in time to watch a pair orange-colored shorts disappear in her bathroom. She chuckled as she walked back to her bed. They won't be able to hear us. Now, let me explain what happened. She watched as Naruto walked out. He did not face her as he stood next to the bathroom. She walked to him and grabbed hold of his wrist, pulling him to follow her. She made him sit down on the chair in front of her makeup table. He glanced up, looking at her in the mirror as she wrapped her arms around him. He flinched slightly. She set her head next to his. I am calling what happened Fox was a flight or fight mechanism that caused you to change and run. Flight or fight is a basic survival instinct that is in about every living being. Kakashi said that since you were little and Anko was bigger, you chose flight. He rolled his eyes at the little part. She smiled and stood up. She grabbed the bottle of hair detangle and put some in his hair. She grabbed a brush and brushed his hair. She watched him relax under the attention. He bowed his head, closing his eyes. Since you are like a fox, and Anko is like a snake, which both species have hate for each other, you ran away from a situation you felt like you were in danger of. You ran to me and hid next to me. When Kakashi and Anko walked in to tell me what happened, you were growling at them. I sent Anko off and had Kakashi get you for me, but you tried to bite him and moved away from him. Since Kakashi is like a dog, which foxes and dogs have a type of like and hate relationship for each other. He finally caught you and I took you. You calmed down, but we found it was not you, in truth. I told you to transform, using the ideal you came up with your nails. You did not listen. You just acted like a fox. You even attacked Kakashi, grabbing hold of his pants. I even yelled at you and you cowered down and moved off, like a frightened animal. We came up that you might be like this for a while from a few days to, forever. You snapped out of it when you sniffed food. Naruto looked up when she stopped brushing his hair. It was flat on his skull. He looked at her affection. It could happen again, he asked. I believe so. I will be having Anko hang around you so you will not do that, but at least we know how to snap you out of the trance. It will be later. Why did you ask me to change back? To see if you could change and to have some fun. Tomorrow I will be having your teammates take care of you, which I know they will take you to the others. I want you to cause some mischief. Kakashi had an ideal of sealing clothes in the collar. You may not like it, but you will be wearing a bell. He snorted at her and she rapped her knuckles on his head. She looked at the clock on her nightstand. It was now 5:20. She let out a sigh, guessing she should go to her office. She might get some sleep there. No one would think she went that early. She looked to Naruto as he yawned. Did you get any sleep? She asked. He shook his head no and she gave him a small smile. Well, transform in your chibi and let me put you in your box. He snorted, knowing she was having fun with this. He willed himself in his chibi form and glanced to her as she picked him up. She set him on the bed and he curled up in a ball, placing his tail over his nose. He watched her go to her closet and pull out a box. He gave another snort as she stuffed a thin blanket in it. She stood up and walked back to him. She picked him up by the scruff and set him in it. She set the box on the floor and looked down at him. Try and get some sleep. I believe Kakashi will be here at 6 to get you. If you happen to wake up before he comes, escape your box. He snorted at her and curled back up. He fell asleep, dreaming of ramen. She looked to her bed and let out a sigh. She grabbed the food she brought them and walked out of her room. She left the door opened a crack and walked downstairs. She put the food back up and sat down in the dining room. She made herself look depressed as Shizune served her food. Tsunade stopped her from fixing Naruto a plate. She quickly explained what happened. Shizune sat down heavily, eating slowly. Tsunade took off for her office, to get more sleep. The hunters looked around the area as they walked to the gates of Konoha. Light was barely filtering to earth, causing birds and small animals to wake up, and going on their day's choir of scavenging or hunting for food. Ron clenched his fist, wanting to kill something, more like a ninja. He never met a ninja or even a person like that in his life. He shuddered, remembering the eyebrows of the man, bowl-cut hair, the ping sound as light reflected off his teeth and the pose he made. He did not know if his vision was damaged. He shuddered again, remembering how loud he was, and it was plain out scary, weird and horrifying. He wonders if all of the Leaf Ninja or even the whole village was like this. All he asked was for directions to this village yesterday and asked of how to get an audience with the Hokage. He could not sleep last night. His dreams were of man, ranting about flames of youth. They stopped once ninjas dropped down from the gate and appeared at their sides from the forest. Ron clenched his jaw, seeing the one reason he hated ninjas, their ability to blend in their surroundings, better than hunters. He did not like the feeling he was the one hunted, or not knowing when the final blow will come. He looked to the ninja that was standing in front of him. State you business. The women said. Yeah, we are here to talk to the Hokage, on a private matter. We are also here to pick up supplies before we venture home. I will need to see identification, she said. Ron frowned and dropped his bag. He rummaged through it, finding his ID at the bottom of his bag. The others pulled theirs out and handed them to the women. He tossed his, not caring he angered someone here. He wrenched them out of the women's hands when she held them out him and threw them in his bag. You come a long way to visit Konoha, she said. Yeah, we decided to try this place for hunting. It was plentiful, but I have businesses I need to discuss with your leader of your village, he said sarcastically. If you write a letter for the Hokage, I will send it to her too for you. She will send you a message at her conveniences. I hope you have a good stay in Konoha. Please have your ids on you at all times. The gate doors swung open, far enough for the group to pass by. Ron stopped and snorted his thanks for paper and pen. He wrote out his message and folded it. He watched them stamp it closed, but he knew it would be ready by many eyes before falling into the intended hands. He looked to his crew and turned around. Let's find a hotel to stay at and get something to eat first. Might as well explore and get some supplies out of the way. They followed him, having to stop for directions to the nearest and cheapest hotel. Foxed, Kakashi walked up to Tsunade's room. He knew the woman was already gone, seeing her do some errands in the village. He stopped, looking at the open door. It was open enough for a small fox to slip through and escape into the building. He pushed the door open slowly and walked in, not making a sound. He looked around her room for any sign of Naruto. He moved to the right side of her bed and his eye widened. Cardboard was all over the floor, shredded in tiny pieces. He looked to the white strips of cloth piled in what he thought was a nest. He looked around, looking for any other mess, which he did not want to clean up. He scratched his chin in thought, wondering if he should have had Sasuke and Sakura meet at the Hokage home, not the bridge. He knelt down, moved some of the cloth away, and found yellow. He let out a sigh, glad he did not have to track down a fox kit. He pushed more of the cloth away and looked at Naruto. He shook his head, watching him kick his back leg in his sleep. He scooped him up, hearing him whine, but was still asleep. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small orange collar, with a bell. He jingled it, making the bell chime. There was no way Naruto was going to get lost, if he ran. He slipped it on, moving it around until he looked at the small metal plate. It had the symbol of Konoha on one side, a swirl on the right and a name that Kakashi picked. He was still wondering why Tsunade sent him a letter, telling him to place a nameplate on the collar he got and pick out a name to put on it. He guessed so that people that did not need to know it was Naruto. He read the name he picked, Yasuo, calm. He snorted, knowing Naruto was far from that, expect sometimes in his sleep. He let out a sigh, hoping Naruto will snap out of this trance. He wonders if not giving him to Anko or placing a bowl of food in front of his nose might work. He gave a shrug and left the room. Foxed. Sakura peeked into the flower shop owned by Ino's mother. She saw the blonde kunoichi. She walked in and gave a smile to the girl. What do you need, Sakura? Ino asked. Sakura moved Naruto, and Ino quickly looked around the room and entered into the back room. The girl came back and pulled off her apron. I told my mom I was going out to train with you. Ino said in a low voice. Sakura nodded. Kakashi-sensei called for a team meeting, saying we would be keeping an eye on Naruto. I thought you might want to come. We already told Choji, Shino, Kiba, and Lee. Sasuke went to see if he could not find the others. I said I would try for Hinata and Neji. If I find them, we are meeting at Team 7's meeting spot. Ino nodded and took off for a moment. She came back and both girls left, heading for the Hyuga clan home. Foxed. Sasuke ignored the fangirls he still had and sympathy talks of how bad it must be to have Naruto on his team. The ones he and Sakura found, were following him. He found Shikamaru and waited as he finished playing Go with one of the elders. He won. Now he and the others were heading for Team 7's meeting spot. He was not able to find 1010, but was told she would be visiting Neji for training. He would let Sakura deal with the girl. He flinched at a high squeal of Hi Sasuke-kun formed 6 fangirls, which were not even his age. He rolled his eyes, trying to come up with a way to get rid of the fangirls. He turned a corner and spotted Sakura with the rest. His group picked up speed and caught up with them and all took off for the little bridge. Foxed. Kakashi was thinking why Naruto attacked him like he did last night. Dogs and foxes had a like and hate relationship. He guessed that was a reason, but he felt more like a wolf. He shrugged and looked around the area. He was at the little bridge, waiting for rest of Team 7 to arrive. He did tell Sakura and Sasuke to meet him at 7. It was now close to 8. He was wondering if his students did not trust him enough, that he would be on time. He shook his head shamefully. He looked up and raised an eyebrow, wondering if overnight, Team 7 got new members, which he did not get the memo. He saw the shocked expression from Sakura and a raised eyebrow from Sasuke. As the group got closer, Sakura spoke out, pointing a finger at him. When did you get here? Were you on time? She asked. Kakashi scratched the back of his head, thinking of a good excuse to use. Yeah, I got here on time. It was hard to handle Naruto, since he wanted to see his team so bad. All the whining gets on your nerves real quick. It was not true. He arrived at the bridge right when Naruto woke up. The first minute was filled with both staring at each other. After that, it was filled with ways to stop being used as a chew toy, then chasing. He let out a sigh at remembering chasing Naruto. He was quick and being the size he was did not help. Kakashi reached up and rubbed the top of his head, where he hit a tree. He managed to trip Naruto and bent forward to grab him, hitting his head. He ignored the pain and grabbed Naruto by the tail. He looked to Sakura as she waved her hands in front of his face. He blinked, waiting for her to speak. He smirked as she mumbled something about him, before speaking up. Where is Naruto then? She asked. He reached up and starched the back of his head. Well, about that, it is kind hard to explain. He watched many rolled their eyes. He was about to speak up, when they heard growling. Kakashi looked down and let out a sigh. The young ninjas followed his gaze and became shocked. There was a small blonde fox kid with sky blue eyes. The tip of its ears and tail were white. The feet were white. They watched it shake its head, as it held on part of Kakashi's pant legs. They heard a chiming noise. They noticed that the ends of the man's pants were ragged. They looked up at him as he gave them an amused look. It all started when Naruto decided to find the hidden ninja. He told them what caused the change, that he was in a type of trance that Tsunade called fox trance in their theory. We think he will come back to himself after a set time. He may even come out of it, if something happens to him or other factors. I guess since you are all here, it will be good. Also, Tsunade-sama asks that you call him a different name. In this form, he is Yasuo. In his other fox form, call him Yasutaro, peaceful. I think it will be good to practice, since in the future, we might have a mission that calls for us to be under different names. Now, I think it will be wise to get something he can chew on and keep an eye on him. Also, he has not eaten. Save the receipts. In a loud rip, all looked down again. Eyebrows rose, seeing that Kakashi's left pant leg, from the knee down, was ripped off. They watched the kid tug at the material, trying to get it free from Kakashi. Kakashi shook the material loose and watched the kid tumble down the bridge. His eye went wide as it headed for the side of the bridge. He let his breath go. He was holding when the kid stopped rolling. Kakashi looked down and let out a sigh. He looked up at the group. I have to go. Tsunade asks you return him at noon at her office. She wants to talk to you about the training trip she wants to do. Kakashi pulled out his book and flipped it open. He made a hand seal and disappeared, leaving a cloud of smoke behind. The group of young ninja looked to the fox kit, Naruto. They watched him as he shredded the cloth in tiny pieces, obvious of them. Do you think if we put his favorite food in front of him we'll snap him out of this trance? Kiba asked. They looked at him, thinking that would be a good idea. They heard a snort and turned to the other end of the bridge. Jiraiya walked towards them, carrying a plastic bag in one hand. His other arm was wrapped around a paper bag. He stopped next to them and looked to the kid as it made a mess of the cloth. He gave another snort. I thought of that as well. You should have seen the mess he made in the old hag's bedroom. Shredded cardboard and a bed sheet he made into a nest. Someone grab him, we are going to the training ground, he said. Sakura moved close to Naruto and knelt down. Naruto stopped shredding and looked at her. He tilted his head. She reached out her hand and let him sniff her. She was puzzled as his head turned and started to sniff the air. They watched the ears point forward and his tail was held out, level with his body. It gave a series of barks and took off, running though the group of young ninjas. Jiraiya cussed as the kid circled him, yapping in happens. He quickly brought up the plastic bag, watching as the kid jumped to get at it. He grumbled and shot many cusses at different people before looking at the group. Sasuke walked forward and managed to grab Naruto, barely. He caught a back leg. He smirked as the kid arched its body towards him and tried to bite him. He grabbed it by the muzzle and let go of the leg. He snorted as it fought to get loose, using its front legs to try to push his hand away. He grabbed it by the scruff with his free hand and stood up. He snorted as it struggled in his hold and growled at him. He looked to the group, his smile still on his face. Sakura walked forward. She had the ripped up material in her arms. Sasuke, don't be so mean, she said, trying to hold back her laughter. He shagged and handed it to her. She scratched behind its ears and looked to Jiraiya. He was already walking off. The group quickly followed him, some wondering what was in the brown bag. They already knew what was in the other. Foxed. Tsunade leaned back in her chair. She reread the message she was given a few minutes ago. Anger rose slightly as she read. Hokage-sama, my partners and I have traveled to your village to claim what is rightfully ours. About a week ago, we captured a golden fox, unusual in size. It got away from us, but we were able to dart it. We knew how long the tranquilizer will take effect and knew where the fox would fall. When we arrived to the spot, it was not seen. The next day, after entering a small town, spending the night, we overheard talk from the owner, saying he saw a large fox with a group of your ninjas, 4 Junin and a bunch of children. We talked with the people of the town and they said they saw it was with them. We tracked them and they said they did not have the fox or even knew of one. We have come to seek an audience with you and discuss the matter of this theft. I ask you to meet you sometime in the next few days. We are busy as it is. I hope we solve this problem soon. I was told we would be found when you have time to meet with us. Ron Wo. Tsunade set the message down and looked to Kakashi. The man did not get a chance to change his pants, when he was notified the Hokage wanted to see him. She looked down, a smirk forming on her lips. Let me guess, he snapped out of already and you are having your fun? He asked in a lazy tone. Yes, He did. It happened after he smelled the food in the refrigerator. Now, what are we to do about this? She asked. He shrugged and sat down. I don't think they know who they saw when they were following us. Asuma, Kuranai, and I followed them through the market. They did not show any signs they recognized my voice or our faces. I was eyed because of the state of dress I was in. I found who was their leader and spoke around him. Same thing happened. We could deny you had any ninjas in the area, or we could say that the fox belongs to one of our ninja. We could have Inuzuka Sum say it belongs to her, dabbling in raising different forms of the dog family. Tsunade shook her head. No. I don't think that will work. We need a good excuse of either to say the fox belonged to one of us, or not at all. It will have to be convincing either way. She let out a sigh. She nodded to herself, thinking of something. We could say it was a summon they captured, since Naruto does have a summon tattoo now, and due to their interference you and the others got information about a target late and caused one of you hurt, Naruto himself. We could fake bandaging a leg or arm up, just need to have a little play to go with the excuse. Kakashi nodded his head. He stood up and looked to her. Well, I am going home to change. Call me if you need me. Kakashi, don't you dare tell the others that Naruto is himself. I want it to be a surprise. He chuckled to himself and disappeared from the room. Tsunade locked her fingers together and rested her chin on her hands. She narrowed her eyes, thinking of what could go wrong. She looked to a clock in the room and found it was 10. She thought of her choices, not liking them. She looked to her desk. She opened the center drawer, pulled out lotto tickets, and quickly filled many out for the various chance prizes she could win. Her two assistants, Hagane Katetsu and Kamizuki Azuma, walked in with some paperwork. She looked up and leveled a gaze with the two. Take these and have this message delivered. The address is on the inside. The two nodded and took the items. When the door was shut, Katetsu quickly counted the lottery tickets, finding over 50. Both looked at each other, rolling their eyes. They took off in different directions to do their tasks. Foxed. Jiraiya grumbled as Kiba tried to teach Naruto a trick. He glanced to the 6 empty bowls of ramen. His ideal did not work and he was not happy about that. He looked to his pocket watch and snorted at the time. He looked to Kiba as he forced Naruto to sit. He stayed this time. Kiba held out a treat of jerky at nose level. He was grinning as he repeated the word sit. Naruto tilted his head, laughing his ass off in his mind. He was having too much fun with the group. He glanced to the treat in Kiba's hand and decided he earned it now. He picked up his right paw and swatted it out of the boy's hands. He took the piece and took off, dodging Kiba's attempt to get him. He ran to the Sennin. He barked at him, before running off and started to run circles around the young ninja. Sakura let out a tired sigh. Stamina freak, was all she could say before letting herself fall backwards on the ground. They had arrived at the training ground and Jiraiya set out the bowls of ramen. Sakura set him in front of the bowls and all watched him sniff the contents. The kid then batted a paw in the bowl, before tasting the chicken ramen. They waited for Naruto to come back to himself, but he did not. He just ate, devouring all bowls. When he was done, broth was all over him and they watched him roll in the dirt. Jiraiya moved forward to stop him, but the kid jumped up and took off running into the forest. Everyone took off, chasing the kit. It was still fast even with the bulge of its stomach. It was just a complete mess. Many of the young ninjas crashed into bushes or into others. After 2 hours, Shikamaru called for a halt and formulated a plan. It ended up pressuring the kid into a Cretan area, where Shikamaru would capture it, using his shadow techniques. The trick worked and a whining kid was not happy. They returned to the area and sort of crashed. Kiba for the past 20 minutes tired to teach the kid basic commands, but it failed. Jiraiya got tired of its yapping as it ran around the group. He reached into the brown bag. The crinkling causing the kit to stop in its tracks. All eyes traveled to the Sennin as he pulled out items. Shampoo, brush, leash, towel, and a rubber chew toy. He put everything back up, except the chew toy. He looked to the kid as it cautious walked towards him. He smirked and squeezed the toy, it squeaking. Everyone watched the kit jump back and bared its teeth. It was in the shape of a bone. Jiraiya rolled it to the kit and watched it attack the item, that was much bigger than it. It grabbed hold on the end and started to chew. Jiraiya let out a sigh, wondering if Naruto will come back to his senses. After a half hour of peace, it was broken by Jiraiya standing up. He grabbed the bag and looked to the group. His eyes flicked to the kit. It was fast asleep, sleeping on the chew toy. Shikamaru rolled his eyes and quickly had a shadow attach the kit. It woke up, trying to escape. Jiraiya grabbed it by the scruff and walked away, kicking the toy to one of the group. The group followed him to a small stream, watched him attach the leash around the kit's neck, and pulled off the collar. "We have about 30 minutes to meet with the old hag," he said. They nodded and watched the man dunk the kid in the water. He pulled out the shampoo, the group finding it was not for dogs. Sakura smirked as the man washed the kid and it struggled in his hold. He quickly rinsed the soap away and wrapped it in the towel. He handed it off to Hinata, whose cheeks became slightly pink. "Let's go," the man said. They took off, following the man to Hokage office. Foxed. Ron received their message. He was not happy that the meeting was a week from now. He found his team and told them to return to the hotel and get changed. They were going to go see the leader, Hokage, right now. He went back to the hotel they were staying at and sat down on the bed. He narrowed his eyes, feeling he knew someone in this village. He ignored it and went through his bag, looking for presentable clothes. Foxed. Tsunade looked up as the group of young ninjas walked into her office, followed by Jiraiya. She nodded to herself, seeing 3 out of 4 Junin instructors walked in. She watched Hinata lose her hold on Naruto and he ran straight to her. He rounded her desk and sat next to her. She smiled, knowing he had fun. She reached down and picked him up by the scruff. She snickered at the name Kakashi picked. She looked to the group as she set him on top of her desk. "I hope you had fun today. Now to discuss the training trip I plan to send you on. First, Naruto, would you go off and get changed?" Everyone looked to the kit, Naruto, as he turned to Tsunade. A snort came from him as he moved to the edge of the desk to jump down. Many were surprised. Jiraiya walked forward and yelled at both Fox and Slug. "You mean the brat was himself all this time?" he asked, his anger rising. Tsunade looked at him, a smile crossing her lips. She nodded her head. Jiraiya snarled at her and looked to Naruto as he was huffing in laughter. "I'm going to kill you," Jiraiya said. He walked forward and raised his fist. Tsunade sent a glare at him, but the man did not stop. Naruto curled into a ball, hiding his nose with his tail. Right before Jiraiya made contact, Naruto changed once again. Jiraiya took a step backwards and shook his hand from the pain he was in. Tsunade reached out and touched the stone idol of Naruto. The only thing that was not stone was the collar. Everyone was quiet as Tsunade looked to Jiraiya, her anger rising in the room, causing everyone to cower down. Jiraiya looked at her, holding his hands up, trying to subdue her. "I was not going to hit him that hard, I promise." He backed away, as her killer intent rose. She stood up and walked around the desk. He stopped as he came face to face with his nightmare. The Junin quickly made the young ninjas move away from the door as Tsunade sent a punch to the man's stomach. He flew back, going through the doors and making contact with the wall. He slid down, unconscious. Kakashi walked out from behind a door, rubbing his nose. In his other hand was his book. Ninjas outside stopped, wondering what happened. They were afraid to pass by the doors, unless they wanted to cross the Hokage's wrath. Ron and the rest of his group stood there seeing the damage. He looked around the area, seeing fear on the faces of ninjas and other people. He spent long enough in this village and he wanted what was his, and now. Kakashi noticed them and walked inside the office. The 2 guards stationed at the office, thankfully moved far enough from the doors when they felt killer intent. Long experience with the Hokage's anger taught them to move or face being squashed. They closed the doors and took up their positions. They ignored Jiraiya, knowing he would wake up soon. Ron walked forward, ignoring the glances he got from the ninjas. He glanced to Jiraiya's still from before, bringing his attention to a guard in a cat mask. I want to talk to the Hokage now. The guard looked at him and spoke up. Do you have an appointment? He asked. Ron curled his nose at the man. Yes, but I will not wait till next week. I want to talk to him now, he said. She is in a meeting at the moment. Once they are done, I will see if she can talk to you or not. Please sit in the waiting area. Ron snorted and walked off. He sat down on the bench set along the wall. The rest followed him. Nina spoke up. I think this is a useless. We should have given up on it and gone home, she said. He looked to her, causing the group to flinch. I will not. I got a message from the ship about word of a buyer of rare animals and a group of hunters to employ. He would pay about any amount for the animals and we can be set for a long time for working with him. She sat up and looked to the others and back to him. Where? She asked. Far north. It would take us 2 months to get there. Khan already sent word to them. We would have to pass the land of lighting, but it would be a good place to get supplies. We will have to wait for word if we are hired. I want that fox. The group nodded and stayed quiet, thinking of the possibilities. In the Hokage office, Kakashi walked forward and saw the stone image of a small fox. He looked to Tsunade as she touched it again. She ran a finger down the spine and watched the stone shift to fur and a passed-out fox. She looked to him as he spoke up. Those hunters are outside. She clenched her jaw as she looked at the doors. She looked to the group of ninjas as she leaned back in her chair. I will talk to you in a few minutes. Meet me at the Hokage home. Kakashi, you stay here. The masked man nodded and the rest walked out. Kurenai told the guards to send in the hunters and they left the building. Kakashi sat down and looked to Naruto as he slept. Tsunade spoke up, not looking at him as she grabbed a file folder and set Naruto on top of a stack, using him as a paperweight. Jiraiya was going to hit him and he turned into stone. I thought so, he said. Both looked to the doors and waited for the group of hunters to enter.